He is Yogi Roth, Pac-12 Network. He's been on the show. You guys loved him last time he came on. We hope he's as good this time. I know he will be.
a lot of pressure.
What a setup right there. He's on the JohnstonRVCenter.com hotline. Welcome in, Yogi. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Good morning, fellas.
Good morning.
Yeah, remember that time Tiger just shot 60s every time at Augusta? No pressure. Just keep being good, Yogi.
I'll do my best.
When Alabama, if you could just summarize, and we'll go deeper in this, but just as an overview, your opinion of what they got when they hired Kalen DeBoer.
Yeah, they got a guy that is built for it. You know, the job's not going to be too big for Kalen DeBoer by any stretch. I think it's often talked about, you got to follow a legend. I saw it out here at SC when Pete Carroll went to the NFL. We've seen it many times. We're seeing it right now. And Kalen DeBoer is going to go attack it, just like his teams have attacked opponents ever since he's been a play caller or head coach way back at NAIA schools, or, you know, most recently at Washington, taking his team to the national championship and undefeated, and, you know, the most challenging Pac-12 league I've seen in 20 years. So they're getting a guy that's built for it. I think he's going to embrace everything that is Alabama. Also the idea that he doesn't know everything that is Alabama. He's going to have to learn, and he's going to be a seeker in that regard. He's bringing over, at least from what I've seen so far, a phenomenal coaching staff. I mean, this coaching staff is going to be similar to like that team photo of Nick Saban's years ago, where you're like, whoa, everybody's a head coach now. I expect that to be similar, whether it's his offensive coordinator, Ryan Grubb, or Nick Sheridan, and Jamarcus Shepard, or Scotty Huff. I mean, it is a loaded staff if all of those guys that we've seen reported are on their way offensively over to Tuscaloosa. And then I think the players, man, I mean, they're going to love them. They're going to love playing for them. I mean, look, what do players want? They want to win. They want to find a way to achieve their dreams, which is win in college and get to the NFL. And now, you know, the thing I'm probably not as well versed in as you guys are is they want to get paid, right? So I'd imagine Alabama's collective is incredibly well set up and supported. So I think he's going to walk in, and, you know, it's not going to be perfect. No year one anywhere ever is. So don't expect that if you're Alabama fans. But he will go to work on this thing. He's detailed. He's process oriented. He'll have a great pulse and feel for the team. I think, yes, he hasn't lived in that region of the country before or coached there, as you guys were referencing in the break or in the previous segment, but he's going to adapt just fine. He'll learn. He'll lean into it. He's got a humility that will be reflected by everybody in the facility. And I know he's excited and you know, heartbroken in terms of, you know, how he had to leave Washington after only a couple of years and getting that place to where he got them. But I know he's energized to go attack this thing, and I'd imagine he will, and I think he'll have success.
From the minute he retired, I thought this was the best candidate available, and I said that, and I was kind of openly campaigning, and the criticism was, as you kind of referenced there, the region, and this guy can't recruit. And there were people saying, look, if you look at his composite recruiting, it's like in the 50s. And I'm like, well, hell, if it's in the 50s and he's playing for a national championship, what can he do once he gets to a fertile recruiting ground that is Tuscaloosa and in the Southeast? So I don't think the recruiting is going to be a problem.
No, I don't think so either. I understand the criticism. And look, something's going to be criticized, you know. He and just to remind the fans, like, he's the reigning coach of the year in pretty much every category, and everywhere he's gone, he's won. So I think, yes, that's part of the job, and that's definitely part of the Alabama job. Everything will get criticized, to the car that you drive, to where you go to eat, to, you know, how you walk, what you wear on game day. I'm sure that's just going to be part of the deal. It's fanatical fan base, but Kalen DeBoer can handle it. You know, I don't think that recruiting, while the region changes, again, I go back to what I just referenced, what do players want? You got to go in there and show them a plan. Kalen DeBoer, his best recruiting job was probably, you know, three guys are going to be first or second round picks at receiver, and Rome Odunze and the other receiver, Jalen McMillan and Jalen Polk at Washington. They were all thinking about the portal when he got to UW, and they probably never even heard of Kalen DeBoer. And he walked in there, and in one film session, they were like, okay, not going to go do that. And then the second film session, he said, hey, keep an eye on this quarterback we're bringing in. Here's some film on Michael Penix Jr. And then a week later, he was on campus, and the rest is history. So I do not anticipate that being a dramatic challenge. There'll be a learning curve for sure. I mean, that region is a little different, as we all know. I was saying earlier on another show, I think that probably the biggest learning curve or the biggest adjustment is going to be the amount of people that feel as though that they're a part of this thing and are involved. I don't know what it's like there. I mean, I've read enough stories about Auburn to hear about, man, so many voices, but I would imagine Greg Byrne and Nick Saban have set a pretty good blueprint to make that thing, hum pretty smoothly. And I'd imagine that part, won't change without knowing the details of it. But I think that'll probably be the biggest adjustment is, everybody thinks they're a dramatic part of this thing. And they are. They all have their role. But I'd imagine that everybody isn't walking to the facility that's a fan and telling Kalen DeBoer what offense they like him to run. But he'll probably hear a lot of those opinions and more so than he did at his previous stop.
I would venture to say that Millbank, South Dakota is closer to Tuscaloosa, Alabama than Seattle, Washington is, but I'll wait and let Kalen be the judge of that. I want to ask you, you've got a dry erase board behind you with a play drawn up. What are we getting in Tuscaloosa if you're a Bama fan of that philosophy? Like tell me what do you get in the offense that DeBoer and Grubb brings to town?
Yeah, well, first off, that's my favorite play in football. Sluggo win, old Niners play. We ran it a million times at SC, and I'll be running in flag football in a couple of weeks as the head coach here in Venice Beach. But number one, you're going to get a style for Kalen DeBoer that is going to be aggressive. Systematically, it reminds me a lot from a play calling standpoint of what Bama did in 2020 with Steve Sarkisian in terms of players in space, catching the ball on the move. That's what they're going to be. They're going to be aggressive. They want to create explosive plays, and to create explosive plays, you got to get after it and take some shots. But they won't be reckless. I mean, this is a team, when you study them, they win time of possession. They make sure they utilize the play clock, even if they do throw it 40 times, and you're watching them, try to win the game. And I think when you're around Kalen DeBoer, he's phenomenal in that regard of detail-oriented game planning, putting players in the best position to win. They'll do these three things. They'll start fast, right? If you look at them, I'd say 80% of their games at Washington, they scored on the opening drive of the game, or even the opening drive of the second half. They've been phenomenal there. They've thrived in the middle eight, which is the last 4 minutes of the second quarter, first 4 minutes of the third. That, to me, is all about situational football. And then I think they finish, and that's why I go back to the play clock. I go back to my game notes of when I was calling a bunch of, whether it's Fresno State games or Washington games since he's been there. And they've all kind of said a version of the same things. It's, hey, we want to get after it, we want to be aggressive, but we are going to play really smart football. And when you get to practice, and I was probably as close to him as anybody in America the last couple of years, you watch a systematic approach to the craft. I mean, I've seen a lot of coaches coach situational football. I've never seen what I've seen at Washington in terms of how they do that. So his teams will be prepared for every scenario that comes up in a ball game. The coaching staff will get after it aggressively, but also get after it by having a lot of fun. And then I think the last thing is, like, he will work tremendously at making sure this team is connected. And the way that you do that is, to me, by sacrifice and commitment. He talked to me about that at length prior to the national championship game, just kind of reflecting back on that year one to year two. And that's what the craft is about. I mean, those are the two words that I think, go hand in hand with one another when you're taking over a program, rebuilding a program, or trying to, maintain continuity, which is excellence, which is where he sits today in Tuscaloosa as the head coach at Alabama. And those things won't change. I mean, with all the things changing in college football, the formula to winning isn't. And I think Kalen DeBoer, you go back to his time in Sioux Falls, you go back to him at any stop along the way, that has been the constant. I mean, they've won. And I think that he really believes and trusts in his formula to get winning done and to do it a certain way. And that's why, you nailed it, as he was the best available. I would agree. And, heartbreaking to watch him go and the style in which this radical world of college football is, especially with what he built in Seattle. But with where he sits today, I think Alabama's in the best possible place they could have been once Nick Saban decided to retire.
Yogi Roth is with us, Pac-12 Network. He's been involved in the Elite 11 football camp, played the game at Pitt. And you also, Yogi, were a quarterback's coach there at USC under Pete Carroll. So you know the position. You've been involved in the Elite 11. You've coached it on the collegiate level. You played on the collegiate level. When you look at Jalen Milroe and the style that Ryan Grubb and Kalen DeBoer like, how good of a fit is it? I know any coach can change to fit their players, their personnel. How much of a change, if any, would there have to be to fit what you've seen Jalen Milroe does best?
Well, there'll be an adjustment, and I would never proclaim to know every quarterback that Ryan Grubb or Kalen DeBoer has coached, but I would make a tremendous argument that 1 and 2 are probably Michael Penix Jr. and Jake Haener. Everybody else was probably not near the passer or the dynamic player that either one of those two were. Those are the last two that those guys coach, and those are, of course, one's in the league with the Saints and one's about to be in the NFL. They've had to adjust their whole careers, guys. That's just who they are. So it will not be a challenge by any stretch of the imagination. What I've loved about Washington's offenses, and if I was going to give one line to Jalen Milroe or even that quarterback room, is that you're not going to play catch in this offense. You're going to play quarterback, and you're going to have to make reads, and you have to make decisions. And those decisions and those reads are going to be predicated on your skill set, period. And that skill set will evolve and grow from the first spring practice to the final one, first day in training camp to the end of camp, and game 1 to game 12. That will naturally happen, but there will be a set of rules and foundational principles to the offense that I believe Jalen Milroe is going to walk into. It will make him an incredible quarterback as he moves forward. He will be challenged, but he will never be in a position where his greatest asset, which is his confidence, is going to be impacted. He'll have to learn and all of those things that come with the position. But I would imagine he wants that. When I just look at the two guys that I just referenced, because of the offense they were in and the way they play the game, they're in a really good position in their lives right now in terms of the NFL and everything that provides. So I would imagine I saw like their hug after that initial team meeting. I'm Jalen Milroe. I've probably been either on YouTube or texting with former quarterbacks that these guys have coached, or I'm just sitting in meetings right now saying, okay, let's get after this thing, because it will take his game, I anticipate, to another level.
Yogi, I had a feeling Nick Saban was going to shut it down after this season, but Brock Heward and I were taping something when the Pete Carroll news broke, and his phone kept blowing up, and he's like, I got to check this, and he's like, oh my God, Pete Carroll's out. And then we all started talking about, we had heard rumblings about Nick Saban. I was like, there's no way it's going down today, because there's no way Pete Carroll is done, and then Nick Saban's immediately done, and it went down. You coached under Pete Carroll. You co-wrote a book with Pete Carroll. Have you talked to him, and do you think, he's still so energetic for his age. Is there any chance he will still coach football in some capacity?
Yeah, just a legend. So many stories are running through my mind right now. I can remember being on the sideline during Bama, Texas, back in the day at the Rose Bowl. And that was the day that he accepted the job. And I can remember leaning over to him and say, God, aren't you going to miss this? We look up at the crowd and the stands, and he goes, oh yeah, I'll miss it, yo, but this is every weekend in the NFL. And we haven't talked yet. We missed each other a day or two ago. So trading calls, but talked to enough people around him or have talked to him and know his body language well enough to know that, he's got stuff left in the tank. Where and how, that'll be fun to track. Whether it's head coach in the NFL, his son Brennan is, I believe, a legitimate candidate to be the head coach at Arizona right now. So who knows if he becomes a part of that thing, if Brennan ends up getting that job. I'd imagine that'll be settled in the course of the next 24 to 48 hours. But yeah, no, if you know Pete, he ain't slowing down. This guy doesn't know how to slow down by any stretch of the imagination. Doesn't mean he'll be a head coach, but I'm sure he believes he could. And I'm sure there's dialogue between him and his family of, all right, hey, we've been doing this thing for probably 50 years now. Do we want to take a beat, or do you want to go attack another thing? And knowing Pete, talking to him throughout the season, he didn't anticipate it to come, and he didn't anticipate slowing down. So he was not, to your point of Nick Saban, he wasn't thinking retire. He was thinking get after it. How are we going to get better? What can we do to win next year? Unfortunately, the Seahawks saw it a little differently. But man, that guy, he'll be a benefactor to wherever he goes. My personal opinion, I want him and Saban to flip-flop every weekend on game day. I would prefer that. I think that's just would be amazing for college football. I think we'd all anticipate seeing Coach Saban on that set in some regard. And Coach Carroll, he always brings some energy. So that'd be pretty fun to see those two torn around.
We can spread it around. We'll put Saban on game day, put Pete Carroll on the big noon kickoff pregame show, and everybody wins at that point. I got to ask you about Julian Sayin, because one of the things you do is the Elite 11. He's Alabama's big 5-star commit from San Diego, California, and then there's a coaching change. Still pinned at the top of his Twitter or his X is in front of the Christmas tree with Nick Saban. You think he will enjoy meeting Kalen DeBoer, Ryan Grubb, and does his skill set fit into what they like to do?
I'd imagine he already has met with them, and he will thrive there. I mean, absolutely. I think his ability, his skill set from the high school level is as good as there was in the country. I'd argue really the last couple years when I comp the best guys to what I was around. Then you layer in his personality, his thirst to learn. He's going to be a stud. But that's what that room is. I mean, I wouldn't be shocked to see anything there. We know Jalen Milroe is going to be the guy, but maybe you see a re-emergence of other guys in that quarterback room. Like I think what happens when you bring in a new coach, especially offensively at that position, is you get a new life, right? Oftentimes when you're a quarterback and the positions are kind of set, right? The chairs are set up. You're the 1, you're the 2, you're the 3. You can kind of get comfortable there. And that is not a healthy position for a quarterback. And we've talked about this before. I mean, this is a Shark Tank. There's not a lot of oxygen in a quarterback room. And whenever there's a new coach, especially an offensive one with the background that Kalen DeBoer has and Ryan Grubb has, that entire room is probably feeling, okay, let's go attack this thing. So, yeah, everybody in there, I think, will have a reemergence and be the better version of themselves. And I'd say the same thing for Julian Sayin. So I'd be shocked if he left. I'm sure every other coach in America is throwing everything in the world at him to try to make a change. But I would, if he asked, which I often don't give advice on where to go, I would tell him, if you still want to live in Tuscaloosa, if you're open to that, and you didn't just make the choice for Nick Saban and his staff, then you're not gonna skip a beat with the staff that's coming in there. You're going to be in a great position to achieve everything you dreamt of.
I've gotten to spend some quality time in Venice Beach over the last 6 months. If I ask you more of your go-to, Casablanca, Great White, or Whalers?
Oh, great call. Well, I'd go, because I have 2 kids, I'd go Great White. Best burrito, I think, in LA, breakfast burrito. My wife loves like the bowls that they build there. So that is a staple for us probably once a month. Right after this, we're going to ride our bike to my next favorite spot, which is Zinc. So next time you're in Venice, I better get a call or a text or something like that. I'll take you there. It's a cool French hip cafe restaurant. And me and my kids, I see them already getting ready on their bikes now. That will be our morning here as nobody's going to school. As you guys know.
Randomly, do you guys surf? And the only reason I asked is we were at Whalers and it was the day or 2 days before Alabama, Michigan, and the surf was insane. With the waves were like 10 feet tall that day.
Yeah, they were dangerous, man. Yeah, we do. We surf aggressively. We surf a lot. It's kind of like we're like the Kalen DeBoer offense of surfing, right? Like my kids and I, we attack the thing, man. So yeah, pretty regularly. Grew up in Pennsylvania, but when I was done playing, I moved to Australia and played over there, and that's what got me into the ocean. And then when I moved out here about 20 years ago, I've been in it as often as humanly possible. I'm looking at my boards now as the sun is popping through into my office here, so I apologize for the glare, fellas. But yeah, we will get after. We were there those days. We went there just to take my boys right before I went to the Sugar Bowl. So we went there I guess it was New Year's Eve, or New Year's, the day before that, 30th. And it was aggressive, man. I mean, dangerous. We just went onto the pier where you probably were, just taking photos, running around, just being in awe of what the ocean and that power can bring. And yeah, man, we're there all the time. When it's like that, I am not in the water though. I learned my lesson a long time ago of what my limits are.
Well, if you're right about Kalen DeBoer, or if you Freeze gets it going at Auburn, we'll be back out there at some point, and we'll make good on that breakfast with you.
I love it, man. And I'll let you know, I hope to come down and visit with Coach DeBoer and his staff. They're great guys. You will love, I'd urge everybody, get to know the whole staff, the support staff, the video, everybody that he brings. They're big time. And they're really first class, and I think they're going to thrive there. I don't know if they're going to win as many championships as Nick Saban has. College football is a little crazy now with all the adjustments, but you're going to be proud. You're going to be really proud of the product that I think Kalen DeBoer and his crew puts out on the field every weekend.
Yeah. Excellent information. Go follow Yogi on Twitter, Yogi Roth, and he's on the Pac-12 Network. Elite 11 does tremendous work there. Yogi, it's been terrific, man. Thank you very much for the time.
You got it, fellas. Appreciate you.
All right, buddy. Take care. Yogi Roth with us on the JohnstonRVCenter.com hotline. About to hit the bikes and go to breakfast.